My guest today is Connie Kadansky, and Connie is a sales reluctance coach. Connie, to start, why don't we discuss prospecting, and specifically why prospecting, or even the thought of prospecting, makes salespeople so nervous?
Well, and you just made a very important point here around prospecting. It's not prospecting that causes advisors anxiety, it's the thought about it. And if people can really understand that, then they're on their way to overcoming it. So it's the thought, the assumption, the prejudgment, the limited belief that is causing the anxiety. It's not the activity itself.
And one of the greatest tools that advisors have is self-promotion, but it seems like many salespeople are often reluctant to promote themselves. Why do you think that is?
Well, there are so many different reasons. Some people were raised in a family that we don't brag and we don't boast, and so it can start back as far as childhood. And also, people aren't comfortable talking about themselves in a way of building their credibility and confident, because sometimes they can be said you're too pushy or cocky, etc. And so the fear of self-promotion is really a fear of being pushy or being perceived as being pushy, or perceived as being overly boastful. So I often tell people there's a difference between bragging and self-promotion. Bragging is when you say something that's not true or it's irrelevant to the audience, and that could be an audience of one. Self-promotion is building your credibility. What is it about you that makes you worthy of your prospects' attention? So it's just getting comfortable with that.
And where does emotional intelligence come into play?
Emotional intelligence is 80% of a financial advisor's success. I said it, 80%. So there are three components of emotional intelligence. And the first one is the ability to handle your feelings. And so think about it. Why are advisors not consistently prospecting? Because they have not developed the emotional skill to handle their feelings when they're prospecting. The second component of emotional intelligence is the way that they're communicating to themselves. What is it that they're saying? So when they get 10 voicemails in a row, what is it that they're saying to themselves at that point? And then also the third component is the way that they communicate with other people. And most of us think we're pretty good at communicating with other people, but do you know there are certain little subtleties that we can learn in a very authentic way so that prospects are more willing to engage with us? And I'll give you an example. Oftentimes when advisors are prospecting and talking to people, they'll get certain objections, so to speak, from the prospect. And we're all taught how to overcome those objections, etc. Well, to be emotionally intelligent, and this is the way I teach my clients, is normalize their objection. Make it normal for them to feel the way that they feel. And then you can flip it. So emotional intelligence is learning those subtleties of communication. My favorite quote of all time is that the quality of our life is equal to the quality of our communication, our internal and external communication. So emotional intelligence is really monitoring that internal communication.
So to bring this all back around to call reluctance, is there a way that an advisor can measure or determine if they have call reluctance?
Well, yes, they can determine whether they have call reluctance by looking into their bank account, because that's where it shows up first. Then look into their appointment calendar. How many appointments with new prospects are showing up? You can also go to my website and take a free assessment. It's called the Prospecting EKG, and find out if you have call reluctance. And then there's an assessment that you can personally invest in, time and dollars, to find out what type of car reluctance do you have and to what degree of intensity? And that can be a real turn for people to come to grips with what they're experiencing.
Connie, could you give us a quick tip or maybe a way that advisors can alter their perspective or outlook on, sales calls?
Altering perspective is so interesting and it's so doable, but we get so fixated on our particular perspective because there are people out there in this industry that believe that cold calling doesn't work. Now, remember, car reluctance is much more than the cold call. It can show up when somebody's at a meeting and they want to ask for an introduction or a referral. And so looking at the perspective and then challenging it. So it's kind of like where I tell people, when you're ready to prospect and you stop, immediately write down on a piece of paper, what is that thought that is going through your head at that particular time? Capture it on paper. That's the first step in overcoming car reluctance. So you write it down, you look at it, and then you start looking at other ways to view this particular perspective or assumption or limited belief that is stopping you from prospecting. And that's where also good coaching comes in, where a coach can work some people through and give a formula on how to alter those perspectives. But let's think about it. When people are altering their perspective, they're going to a completely different part of their mind that hasn't been discovered before. So they're opening their mind up to new possibilities and new perspectives.
Well, Connie, you have a great deal of knowledge on this topic, so I'd like to thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us on thewealthchannel.com.